The diplomatic ship of the Velothar descended toward the human colony station with the confidence of beings who had done this thousands of times before. Kekstara stood at the observation window, her crystalline form catching the light as she watched the station grow larger. She had been alive for 230 years. She had negotiated with 47 different species. None of them had surprised her in the last 100 years. Humans were primitives. The reports were clear. They had only recently left their home world. Their technology was basic. Their understanding of the galaxy was limited. They made decisions with their emotions rather than logic. They had no telepathic ability whatsoever. For Kekstara, reading them would be simple work. A scan of their surface thoughts, confirmation of their willingness to cooperate, and they could move forward with integration into the Velothar sphere of influence. The Velothar were an ancient species. They had walked among the stars for 3,000 years. They had built civilizations that spanned entire sectors. They understood mathematics that other species could not comprehend. Their telepathic abilities were evolved and precise. When they looked into a mind, they saw everything clearly. No deception could hide from a Velothar telepath. No truth could remain concealed. The station grew larger. Kekstara could see the human-built structures now. Simple metal and concrete. Functional. Ugly. No artistry. No elegance. She had expected nothing different. Humans were not known for beauty or refinement. The shuttle landed in the docking bay. Kekstara moved with slow grace, her body tall and thin, her movements precise. 3 other Velothar moved with her. The airlock opened. They stepped into the station. Humans waited for them. Kekstara noted their shape. Bilateral symmetry. 2 legs, 2 arms. A head with forward-facing eyes. Crude design. Inefficient. They carried their computing power in their skulls, trapped in soft meat and bone. No external processors. No elegant augmentation. Just flesh and blood and water. One human stepped forward. He was tall for his species, standing at least 180 centimeters. His face was weathered. His eyes were dark. His uniform was military. His bearing was straight, but Kekstara could see the tension in his shoulders. He was nervous. Good. "I am Captain Jack Morrison," the human said. His voice was rough. Humans always sounded rough to Kekstara. Not smooth. Not precise. "Welcome to Station Harmony. I lead the human delegation." Kekstara inclined her head slightly. "I am Kekstara, first negotiator of the Velothar Council. I am here to establish protocols for human integration into the galactic community. Your species has much to learn." Jack nodded. He did not seem offended. He showed respect. This was good. Humans were simple. They responded well to displays of power and authority. "We are honored to learn from you," Jack said. "We have prepared a conference room. We can begin discussions there." They walked through the station. Kekstara noted the utilitarian design. Everything served a function. Nothing was created for enjoyment or beauty. Humans cared only about survival and basic comfort. Their priorities were primitive. The conference room was large and empty. A long table. Chairs on both sides. Simple. Kekstara sat. Jack sat across from her. Her 3 companions sat beside her. Jack had brought 2 others with him. A woman with gray eyes and dark hair, and another man with red hair and freckles. "We want to ensure complete communication," Kekstara said. "We have found that direct telepathic contact is the most honest method. No misunderstandings. No deception. No confusion about intentions or meanings." Jack's jaw tightened slightly. "You want to read our minds?" "Not read, precisely," Kekstara said. "I prefer to think of it as opening a channel of understanding. I will sense your surface thoughts, your basic emotions, your sincerity. This benefits both of us. You will know that we mean no harm. We will know that you are being truthful." Jack was quiet for a moment. Kekstara could sense his hesitation. This was normal for primitives. They did not understand the benefits of telepathy. "If this is necessary for the negotiation," Jack said finally, "then I agree." Kekstara stood. She walked around the table. Jack remained seated. Good. This showed respect. She placed her hands on his head, her fingers spreading across his temples. His skull was warm, soft. She had never touched a human directly before. The sensation was strange. She reached out with her mind. She sent her telepathic tendrils into his consciousness. She expected to find simplicity, basic thoughts about food, comfort, survival, fear, aggression, basic needs. She expected to find a mind like she had touched many times before, linear, simple, clear dot. She did not expect to find a wall of complexity to push back against her presence. Kex single quotes Terra stopped. She pulled back slightly, curious. She tried again, more gently, more carefully. She sent a questioning tendril into his mind. She waited for surface thoughts, simple things, easily readable. Instead, she felt everything at once. Fear and courage existing together. Love and resentment tangled together. Hope and despair running parallel. Joy mixed with sorrow. Every emotion pressing forward at the same time, not one after another, but all together. All existing at once in the same consciousness. Kekstara pushed deeper, trying to understand. She found his memories. A woman's face. His wife. Love so strong it burned, but also resentment. She had wanted him to stay on the home world. He had chosen to come here instead. The love remained. The resentment remained. They did not cancel each other out. They existed together. A child's face. His daughter. She was on the home world. He missed her. He burned with the need to return to her. But he also burned with the need to be here, to protect humanity's future, to expand their reach into the stars. Both drives were equal. Both were essential. Both tore at him from different directions. Kekstara felt his pain. Not discomfort. Not simple injury. Real pain. Deep pain. The loss of a friend. The death of someone close to him. The pain was old. It was integrated into who he was. He had learned to live with it. He had let it shape him. This was wrong. This was not how consciousness should function. Pain should be healed and moved past. It should not become part of identity, but it had. It was, and beneath the pain was something else. A willingness to face more pain. A readiness to accept suffering if it meant protecting others. A conscious choice to sacrifice comfort for something larger. Kekstara nearly withdrew completely. This was not a mind, she understood. This was not a simple consciousness. This was something else entirely. Something complex. Something strange. Something that did not follow the rules of how consciousness should work. She pulled her hands away from Jack's head. She staggered back one step. Then another. Jack looked up at her, concerned. Is something wrong? Kekstara looked at him. Her mind was racing. Her certainty was shaken. For the first time in over 100 years, a telepath of the Velethor had encountered something she did not understand. No, Kekstara said slowly. Nothing is wrong. I simply need to adjust my understanding. Your species is more complex than we expected. She returned to her seat. But inside, she was no longer certain about anything she thought she knew about humanity. Jack did not resist when Kekstara requested a fourth contact, but he insisted on knowing why. I need to see everything, Kekstara said. I need to understand the complete pattern. I need to push past your conscious mind into the deepest parts of your memory. into the foundation of who you are. Why? Jack asked. Because I do not believe what I am discovering, Kekstara said, and I need to verify it. I need to see if the pattern holds at the deepest levels. I need to be certain. Jack was quiet for a long moment. And if it does, then I need to know what it means, Kekstara said. For you, for humanity, for the galaxy. Jack sat. Kekstara placed her hands on his temples. This time, she did not hesitate. She did not advance gently. She pushed directly into the deepest parts of his consciousness, past memory, past emotion, into the foundation of his genetic code and evolutionary history. She moved backward through generations. She followed the thread of his ancestry, the long chain of humans stretching backward through time. She felt the accumulation of all those ancestors in his cells. She felt the weight of their survival, their struggles, their adaptation. Earth, the human homeworld, was harsh. It was not brutal in some abstract way. It was actually deadly. Humans were not the strongest creatures on their world. They were not the fastest. They were not the largest. They had no natural armor. They had no natural weapons. They were soft and slow and fragile. Yet they survived. They survived because they learned. Because they adapted. Because when an environment killed 99% of them, the survivors learned why they had died. And their children survived better because they carried the knowledge of how to avoid death. They survived because they helped each other. The weak were protected by the strong. The sick were cared for by the healthy. The young were protected with absolute determination by their parents. This cooperation made them stronger as a species than they could have been as individuals. They survived because they fought. Because they did not give up when facing hopeless odds. Because they stood and resisted and died still fighting rather than surrendering and accepting subjugation. They survived because they imagined. Because they thought of ways they had never tried before. Because they tried new things even when the old ways had always failed. Because they continued trying until something worked. Kekstara followed the thread of survival deeper. She found the moment when humans stopped being entirely governed by instinct. She found the moment when they began to think, when they began to plan, when they began to imagine futures that did not yet exist. She found the moment they took control of fire, not because they had evolved to control fire, but because they dreamed that it could be done, and they tried until they learned how. She found the moment they invented tools, not because they had evolved appendages suited for tool use, but because they imagined what tools could do, and they created them. She found the moment they domesticated plants and animals, not because they were biologically suited to agriculture, but because they dreamed of a different way to survive and they made it happen. At each moment, humans were not ready. At each moment, they were reaching beyond their current capabilities. At each moment, they were trying to become something more than they were. And they succeeded. Again and again and again, humans succeeded. They failed many times. They died in vast numbers. But the survivors learned, and their children were better equipped than their parents had been. This was the pattern. Humans were not designed by evolution for any single stable form. They were designed for change, for growth, for constant transformation, for the relentless drive to become something more. And Kekstara found something that chilled her to her core. They were not finished. Humans were still evolving. In just the last 10,000 years, human bodies and minds had continued to change. They were still reaching, still pushing, still dreaming of what they could become. Kekstara pushed deeper into the foundation of Jack's consciousness. She wanted to understand what came next. She wanted to see the trajectory. She wanted to know where this endless reaching would lead. She found Jack's deepest dreams. Not the dreams he thought about consciously. The dreams that were woven into his DNA, into the collective unconscious of his species. The dreams that came from the deep past, from all those ancestors who had survived by pushing beyond their limits. The dreams showed her visions. Humans spreading across the galaxy. Humans building civilizations that spanned continents. Humans creating technologies that bent the laws of physics. Humans reaching toward the stars and grasping them. Humans becoming something greater than they were now. And the dreams did not stop there, that they kept reaching. They kept pushing. They kept imagining futures that violated everything that was currently possible. They dreamed of power that transcended physical limitation. They dreamed of understanding that went beyond the known universe. They dreamed of becoming something that was not quite human anymore. Something evolved. Something transcendent. Something that could barely be called the same species anymore. And embedded in these dreams was something that made Kekstara want to flee. These were not fantasies. These were not hopes. These were prophecies. These were the traces of what humans would become, filtered backward through time by the drive that had shaped their species for millions of years. These were the future echoing into the present. Humans would not stay as they were. They would not be content with their current form, their current abilities, their current understanding. They would push and reach and dream and try, and they would transform themselves into something else. Something greater. And there was no stopping it. This drive was woven into their very nature. It could not be educated away. It could not be suppressed. It could only be managed or directed or channeled. Kekstara pushed even deeper. She wanted to know one final thing. She wanted to know if this drive was compatible with peace. If these creatures that pushed and reached and transformed could be allies. Or if they would inevitably become conquerors, spreading across the galaxy and consuming everything they encountered. She found Jack's deepest conviction in this moment. She found his true belief, the thing he knew without doubt. Humans would transform. Humans would grow. Humans would reach beyond their current form and ability. But the choice of how to use that power would still be their own. The choice between creation and destruction. Between cooperation and conquest. Between mercy and domination. And Jack believed that humans would choose mercy, not because they had to, but because some humans, like him, would choose it. And those humans would shape the species toward mercy rather than cruelty. It was a belief. It was not a certainty. It was hope, but hope was enough. Hope was what had driven humans this far. Hope was what would drive them further. Kekstara pulled her hands away from Jack's head. She staggered backwards so forcefully that she fell to the floor. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her crystalline form shimmered with distress. Jack moved immediately to help her up. Kekstara, what happened? Kekstara stood. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Jack with something that might have been awe. Or terror. Or both. I looked into the future, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw what you will become. And I am terrified, not of what you will do, but of what you will become and then decide to do with that power. Because the future is not written. You have chosen not to write it yet. And that freedom is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Jack did not understand. He did not need to. Kekstara understood enough for both of them, and she needed to ensure that the galaxy understood as well. Before it was too late. Before humanity reached its full potential and the galaxy realized what it had allowed to grow among them. Kekstara did not sleep that night. The Velither did not require sleep in the way humans did, but they did require rest. Kekstara did not rest. Instead, she sat in her quarters on the diplomatic vessel and thought about what she had touched on. She replayed the contact in her mind. She analyzed every sensation. She tried to find a logical explanation for what she had experienced. There had to be a reason. There had to be a pattern. The Velither understood all consciousness. They had mapped the brains of every major species. Humans were new. But they were not so different that they could break the fundamental rules of how minds worked. But something had. Kekstara made a decision. She would attempt deeper contact. She would be more careful this time, more systematic. She would not recoil in shock. She would observe and catalog and understand. This was what telepaths did. This was what she had done her entire life. The next morning, she requested another session with Captain Morrison. He agreed, though she detected a new wariness in him. Of course he was wary. She had staggered back from him like he had struck her. He did not understand why. He did not know what she had felt. They met alone in the same conference room. Jack sat across from the table. Kekstara approached him. She was more prepared this time. She had centered her mind. She had prepared her consciousness for complexity. Thus she placed her hands on his temples again. She reached out slowly. She opened herself to his mind gradually, letting the connection build rather than forcing it all. At one start, the emotions hit her like a wave. But this time she was ready for them. She did not retreat. She pushed forward. She wanted to understand love and resentment. Yes, she explored this combination more carefully. In a Velither mind, emotions existed in sequence. One would dominate. Others would follow. Love would exist, complete and total. Then it would diminish as other emotions rose. A Velither could feel love and resentment, but not at the same time. The love would fade, and then the resentment would come. Clean, logical, sequential. But in Jack's mind, the love for his wife did not fade when the resentment appeared. The love burned as brightly as it ever had. The resentment existed at the same intensity. They did not cancel each other out. They did not compromise. They burned together, separate and equal. His love for her was absolute. His resentment of her need for him to stay was equally absolute. This made no logical sense. Yet, it was true. Kekstara pushed deeper. She wanted to understand how his mind managed this contradiction. How did consciousness function when it held two opposing truths simultaneously? How did it not collapse into confusion? Instead of collapse, she found organization. The emotions existed in separate channels within his mind. They did not attempt to merge. They did not attempt to dominate each other. They simply existed together, acknowledged and accepted as equally valid. She found his memories of his wife more clearly now. Her name was Sarah. She was beautiful in the way humans could be beautiful. She had laughed often. She had cried when Jack left. She had asked him to stay. He had chosen to come here anyway. In a Velither mind, this would be a simple calculation. Love would be weighed against duty. The greater priority would win. The lesser would be dismissed as insignificant. In Jack's mind, both remained central to who he was. He would have carried her loss with him in the same way he carried his friend's death. It would have become part of his identity, woven into his sense of self, a permanent weight that shaped his decisions and motivations. Kekstara felt his daughter next. Her name was Anna. She was 10 years old. The thought of her caused an ache in Jack's chest. He wanted to be with her. The need was primal. It was as strong as hunger, as strong as the need to breathe. But the need to be here was equally strong. The need to protect humanity's future. The need to ensure his daughter would have a safe galaxy to grow up in. The need to expand human knowledge and power and reach. He carried both needs equally. He did not diminish one to make the other acceptable. He simply chose to accept the pain of separation because something larger demanded it. This was incomprehensible to Kekstara. She pulled deeper still, searching for the source of this strange consciousness. She moved past emotions into memory, searching for the foundation of how his mind was built. She found his creativity. This was the moment that truly terrified her. In a Velither mind, creativity existed as problem-solving. When faced with an obstacle, the Velether mind would analyze it. It would examine the components. It would apply logic and mathematics and establish principles. It would calculate the solution. The solution would be elegant and precise. In Jack's mind, creativity was chaos. Ideas connected in ways that violated logic. Memories of completely unrelated events sparked new concepts. Words would suggest images that would suggest solutions that had nothing to do with the original problem. His mind moved like a storm, lightning jumping between distant clouds, electricity finding paths that should not exist, and somehow, this chaos worked. Kex, single quotes Tira, found memories of problems that Jack had solved. Technical problems. Organizational problems. Problems that should have required precise analysis. Yet Jack had solved them by thinking sideways, by connecting ideas that had no logical connection, by imagining solutions that violated established principles, then testing them anyway. And the solutions worked. One memory stood out. A failure in the station's oxygen recycling system. The technical specialists had analyzed it. They had found the flaw. The repair required components they did not have. The repair could not be completed. The station faced slow suffocation. Jack had walked to the problem area. He had looked at the failure. He had said something strange. He had said, "What if we use the emergency cooling system in reverse?" The specialists had explained why this was wrong. The cooling system operated on different principles. The pressures were different. The flow rates were incompatible. It should not work. Jack had ordered them to try it anyway. It worked. The cooling system, reversed and repurposed, had compensated for the failure in the oxygen recycler. The station was safe. Jack had solved the problem by connecting two things that should never have been connected, by imagining a solution that violated the rules, by trusting instinct over logic. Kekstara felt the truth of this. She felt Jack's memory of the moment clearly. She felt how his mind worked differently, how it made connections, how it trusted imagination and instinct alongside logic, how it could hold impossible ideas and make them real. She pulled her hands away from his head. She stood and walked backwards several steps. Jack rose, concerned. "What did you find?" Kekstara looked at him. She saw him clearly now, not as a primitive, not as a simple creature, as something else entirely. "I found that I was wrong," she said quietly. "About many things. About all things. Captain, your species is not primitive. Your minds are not simple. You are something that we do not have a category for. You are something we do not understand." Jack watched her carefully. "Is that bad?" Kekstara did not answer immediately. She was thinking about what she had learned. She was thinking about the implications. She was thinking about what a species of creatures like this could become, given time and resources. "I do not know yet," she said finally. "But I think we need to be very careful about how we answer that question." Kekstara requested a third session with Captain Morrison. This time, Jack hesitated. She could see the caution in his eyes. He sensed that something in her had changed. Her shock and confusion had given way to something else. Purpose, determination, a need to know more. "I need to understand more," Kekstara said. "I need to touch your mind more deeply. If you will allow it." Jack considered this. He had no obligation to agree. The negotiations could proceed without further contact. But he looked at Kekstara's face, and he seemed to understand that this was important. "What do you need to know?" he asked. "I need to know why your mind works the way it does," Kekstara said. "I need to find the foundation, the root, the reason." Jack nodded. "Go ahead." Kekstara placed her hands on his temples. This time, she did not approach his consciousness gently. She pushed in deep. She moved past the present moment, past current emotions, into older memories. She moved backward through his life, searching for the moment that had shaped him into what he was. She found his childhood memories. His home world, Earth, a place called California, hot and dry and full of sun. He had been young. He had been playing. He had fallen. It was a small thing. A childhood fall. He had scraped his leg on stone. Blood had come. Pain had come. In a civilized species, this would be tended with medicine. The pain would be removed. The injury would be healed. The child would be comforted, and the incident would be forgotten. But something else happened in Jack's memory. His mother had not removed the pain immediately. She had let him feel it. She had told him what he had done wrong. She had shown him how he had fallen. She had explained why the stone had cut him. She had let him understand that his carelessness had caused the injury. And slowly, the pain had stopped, not because medicine had erased it, but because his mind had learned from it. The pain had taught him something. The pain had been information. The pain had made him more careful, more aware, more able to navigate the world without repeating the mistake. The pain had been a teacher. Kekstara moved deeper. She found more memories of pain. A school test that Jack had failed. The pain of disappointment. The pain of shame. But the pain had also motivated him. He had studied harder. He had learned more. He had failed the next test as well, but less badly. He had continued, pushing through the pain, using it as a guide toward improvement. Pain, repeated and accepted and learned from, had shaped him into someone capable and strong. This was not how consciousness should work. Pain was an error signal. It indicated damage. The correct response was to avoid pain, to flee from it, to eliminate its source. The correct response was certainly not to embrace pain, to accept it, to let it become a tool for self-improvement. But humans did this. Jack had done this. And in doing it, he had become something more capable than he would have been if pain had simply been erased. Kekstara pushed deeper still. She found memories of loss. A friend of Jack's, a person named Kyle. They had known each other since childhood. Kyle had died in an accident when they were both young men. A mining operation. A collapse. Kyle had been inside. He had not survived. Jack's grief was enormous. It filled her awareness. It was crushing. It was overwhelming. It should have broken him, but it had not. Instead, Jack had taken the grief and incorporated it into himself. He had let it remain. He had woven it into his identity. The loss of Kyle had made Jack more protective, more careful, more dedicated to preventing other people from dying, more willing to take risks to save lives because he understood the weight of losing someone. The pain of loss had become the foundation of his strength. Then Kekstara found something else. Something that made her recoil in horror. Sacrifice. In Jack's mind, there existed a willingness to die. Not for himself, for others, for abstract concepts. He would die for his daughter. This made sense. She was his blood. The genetic imperative to protect offspring was universal. But Jack would also die for people he had never met. He would die for humans he did not know. He would die to protect the concept of humanity itself as an idea, as a future possibility. He had actually contemplated this. He had thought about giving his life, accepting his death, enduring pain and final destruction for a goal he might not live to see achieved. And this was not madness. This was not despair. This was conscious choice, deliberate decision, reasonable calculation that some things were worth dying for. The Velether did not think this way. The Velether valued their lives above all other considerations. The Velether would not accept death for anything. They would preserve themselves because self-preservation was the highest law of consciousness. But humans broke this law regularly, and they did not consider it broken law. They considered it virtue. Kextara pushed deeper. She wanted to know if this was truly universal. She explored more of his memories. She found a memory of his wife Sarah asking him to stay on Earth. She found his thinking process. He had weighed his life against humanity's future. He had decided that humanity's future was worth his separation from his wife. He had decided that the chance to help his species expand and survive and reach for the stars was worth the personal cost of missing her. He was willing to trade his own happiness for humanity's possible happiness. And then she found something even stranger. Jack did not actually know if his sacrifice would matter. He did not know if his choices would affect humanity's future at all. He was one person among billions. His absence from Earth might mean nothing. His presence here might accomplish nothing. He was choosing to sacrifice for an outcome that was not guaranteed, that was not even probable. He was sacrificing for hope, for possibility, for a future that might never come to pass. Kextara pulled back. She needed to understand this. Why would a conscious being choose pain and loss and sacrifice for something uncertain? Why would a mind embrace suffering for a goal that might never be reached? She pushed deeper again. She wanted to know. She wanted to understand. And then she found something that scared her more than anything else. Dreams. In Jack's mind. When he was not dealing with immediate problems, he imagined. He envisioned. He created pictures of things that did not exist. He imagined humanity spreading across the galaxy. He imagined a future where humans were equals with the Velothar. He imagined his daughter growing up in a universe where humans had power and presence and influence. These dreams were not passive. They were not fantasies that he entertained and then dismissed. They were blueprints. They were goals. They were the things that drove his choices every day. He looked at what he had imagined, and he decided to make it real. And then, when he failed or faced obstacles, he did not abandon the dream. He modified it. He approached it differently. He tried again. He continued. He persisted despite failure because the dream remained unchanged. Humans dreamed while they were awake, and they worked every day to make their dreams real. Kextara pulled her hands away. She staggered backwards several steps. She fell into the chair behind her. Jack was on his feet immediately. "What is it? What did you find?" Kextara looked at him. She looked at a human for the first time with the awareness of what he truly was. "I found," she said slowly, "why you are dangerous." Jack did not move. He simply waited. "Your species survives on a world that should destroy you," Kextara continued. "A world of violent weather and predators and disease. A world where everything wants you dead. And you survived not through superior intellect, not through advanced technology. You survived because you can endure pain, because you can sacrifice, because you dream impossible dreams and then make them real anyway, because you persist when every logical calculation says you should stop." She stood. She looked directly at Jack. "And the galaxy is not prepared for what you will become." The formal negotiations began the following morning. Kextara approached them with a mind that was no longer certain of anything, but was absolutely clear about what needed to happen. Jack sat across from her, flanked by his human delegation. Kextara sat with her fellow Velothar. She opened the discussion with a proposal that shocked everyone in the room. "The Velothar Council," she said, "proposes that humanity be granted full partnership status in the galactic community, equal standing, representation in all major decisions, access to all technologies shared among partner species, full membership in the Protection Accord." The human delegation showed surprise. This was far more generous than they had expected. Jack hid his reaction behind a calm face, but Kekstara could see the question in his eyes. One of her companions, Velothar named Selvara, made a sound of protest. First Negotiator, this is unprecedented. Humanity has barely achieved space travel. They have no significant technology, no proven military capability. They are not ready for equal partnership. On the contrary, Kekstara said, her voice steady, they are exactly the species that should be elevated to partnership. I have conducted deep analysis of human consciousness. I have examined their psychology, their history, their fundamental drive. I have determined that humanity represents either the greatest opportunity or the greatest threat the galaxy will ever encounter. Threat? Asked another Velothar, Kekstara. You are saying they are dangerous? Yes, Kekstara said simply. But dangerousness is not the question. The question is control. If we include humanity in our sphere as equals, if we share knowledge and technology and position with them, we can influence the direction of their development. We can ensure that when they become powerful, they do so as allies. If we exclude them, if we treat them as subordinates, we risk making them adversaries. And adversaries with their particular characteristics would be very difficult to oppose. Explain, demanded Selvara. Kekstara was quiet for a moment. She could not tell them what she had truly seen. The deepest truths would serve no purpose except to cause panic. Better to give them logic. Better to give them reason. Humans are survivors of a harsh world, Kekstara said. They have evolved the capacity to endure suffering, to learn from pain, to persist despite apparent hopelessness. They can work together toward goals that benefit the group rather than the individual. They can imagine futures that do not exist and work systematically to make those futures real. They are capable of sacrifice for abstract goals. Most dangerously, they are still evolving. They have not reached a stable form. They will continue to change, to improve, to reach beyond their current capabilities. How is this relevant to partnership? Asked Kekstara. Because, Kekstara said, a species with these characteristics will become powerful. It is not a question of if, but when. If they become powerful as our equals, as our partners, they will likely remain our allies. If they become powerful as our subordinates, as our inferiors, they will inevitably seek to overthrow us. The intelligent choice is inclusion. The Velothar delegation was silent. Kekstara knew her argument was strong because it was logical. The Velothar could not resist logic. Selvara tried one more time. But we do not know this for certain. You are asking us to give enormous concessions based on theory. Yes, Kekstara agreed. I am asking you to make a choice based on probability and wisdom rather than certainty. This is what we have always done. We have never had certainty. We've only had analysis. The negotiations continued through the day. By evening, the Velothar Council had approved Kekstara's proposal. Humanity would be elevated to equal partnership. They would be included. They would be included from a position of strength rather than subordination. It was a victory for Jack and his delegation. They could not hide their relief and pleasure. That evening, Jack requested a private meeting with Kekstara. They met in a small observation chamber on the station. They stood looking out at the stars together. What did you really see? Jack asked. Kekstara was quiet for a long time. She decided to be honest. I saw your species, she said. Really saw it. Not as primitives with primitive minds. Not as simple creatures with simple thoughts. I saw you as you actually are. Creatures shaped by a world that wanted to kill you. Creatures who learned to thrive in suffering. Creatures who dream and work to make those dreams real. Creatures who will sacrifice for others. Creatures who are still changing, still becoming something more. And that terrifies you, Jack said. It was not a question. Yes, Kekstara admitted. It terrifies me because I do not know what you will become. I do not know if I have done the right thing. I do not know if bringing humanity into our sphere as equals will result in greater peace or greater conflict." Jack nodded slowly. "But you did it anyway. Because the alternative was worse," Kekstara said. "Because isolation would have guaranteed eventual conflict. Because if I am going to be terrified of what humans become, I prefer to be terrified of allies rather than adversaries." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I ask you something? When you touched my mind, when you went so deep, did you see what I want to become? Did you see my dreams?" Kekstara looked at him. "Yes, I saw them. Visions of humanity reaching the stars. Visions of humans becoming partners with the Velethor and other species. Visions of great growth and great power. But more importantly, I saw that you believe, truly believe, that humans can become great without becoming cruel. That power does not require domination. Is that true?" Jack asked. "Is that actually possible?" Kekstara considered the question. "I do not know. I cannot know. But I believe that hope is the only rational response to uncertainty. I believe that you should reach toward your dreams. I believe that the galaxy should support you in that reaching." Jack looked at her. "But you're afraid." "Yes," Kekstara said. "I am afraid. I am afraid of what you will become. I am afraid that you might choose cruelty instead of mercy. I am afraid that you might use your power to dominate instead of cooperate. But I am more afraid of what will happen if I do not take the risk. I am more afraid of losing the opportunity for alliance." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Outside, the vast galaxy wheeled in its rotation. Somewhere out there, other species watched and wondered about this moment. Other species would learn that the Velethor had raised humanity to equal status. Some would see opportunity. Some would see threat. Some would see both, but the decision was made. Humanity would be included. Humanity would have access to technology and knowledge and position. Humanity would be treated as equals. The galaxy had just gambled on human nature. They had gambled that mercy and cooperation would triumph over cruelty and domination. They had gambled that humans, given power and knowledge and freedom, would choose to build rather than destroy. It was a gamble. But sometimes, Kekstara reflected, gambles were the only rational choice. Sometimes hope was the most logical path forward. She looked at Jack one final time. "Your species will reach for the stars. Your people will transform and grow and become something greater than you are now. And when that happens, when humans have become powerful enough to challenge any species in the galaxy, I hope you will remember that the Velethor believed in you. I hope you will remember that the Velethor chose partnership with you when we could have chosen conflict." Jack met her eyes. "I hope that by the time we're powerful enough to challenge anyone, we're wise enough to choose partnership instead." Kekstara did not respond verbally, but something in her posture softened. For the first time since touching Jack's mind, she seemed less terrified. Not confident, not certain, but willing to accept the uncertainty and move forward anyway. Outside, the stars continued their eternal rotation. And somewhere in that vast darkness, humanity's future was being born. A future of great power and unknown choices. A future that would reshape the entire galaxy. The galaxy was now holding its breath. It had just invited a phoenix into its nest. It had just given fire to creatures who understood how to use it. It had just decided to trust that when humans burned, they would warm the world rather than consume it. The gamble had been made. Now they would wait to see what hand fate would deal them.